Welcome to the chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 90 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by the Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Half, and you can follow me on Twitter at halfandhalf_TPL. I am joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've heard him on the Tough Cover radio show. It is Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at MarkHenryJr_. Mark, how are you feeling this fine Wednesday morning?
I could not feel better, to be quite honest with you. I feel great. It is, a heck of a time in Philadelphia right now. Was a heck of a time on Sunday, obviously. Still feel like I'm coasting off that energy throughout the week here. But, this week, it feels like it can't go by fast enough. This episode for me will be a little all over the place, a little inside baseball for people. I'm currently trying to figure out a way to take off basically the Friday before the Super Bowl and then potentially the Monday and the Wednesday for parade or for celebration purposes. So I am currently overloading my work schedule right now so I can get everything done in case we have something to celebrate in about 10 days.
Yeah, I had this grand plan for all the film study that I was going to do over the next couple weeks for the Super Bowl, and so far none of that's panned out because I got sucked into a QB heat mapping data project that turned out to be way bigger than I anticipated, and you guys can check that out on my Twitter. I tweeted out heat maps for every quarterback that threw over 200 passes this year, their stats and their comparison to league average. I listed the top three and bottom three in each category, in each target zone, and some observations from that. And then today I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get into film review. And I inadvertently fell backwards into another massive data project that I'm going to start releasing later this afternoon. So a little bit of preview of that is I went through and scraped the DVOA data for every year since 2000. So if you've ever wanted to compare how does the 2000 49ers offense compare to the 2019 Chiefs offense for whatever reason, you can now do that. You can figure out what the best offenses and defenses and passing offenses of all time have been. I just tweeted out the Eagles results, but I'm going to be going through the rest of that and compiling it. So I just keep coming up with big projects to fill the time instead of getting to the film, which is what I want to do. But before we get into the games, I also do want to mention that I did upgrade our Chalk Talk podcast hosting, and so there had been some issues with distribution to any feed except for Apple Podcasts. That should all be fixed now. Chalk Talk is going out to iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, pretty much anywhere you can find podcasts except for Google Podcasts, which is going to take about 2 weeks. So you guys check that out. There's links to all those in my Twitter link tree. If you have any issues with feeds, please let me know, but nothing should be interrupted. Those should start going out with this episode, so I'm pretty excited about that. Okay, go to a couple comments here before we dive in. Steve on Facebook says, I think the Eagles will win, and I believe I'll be at the parade again.
Let's go, Steve.
Let's go. Chris asked if we've heard the breaking news coming from the Eagles and Josh Stills. I'm not sure what that's alluding to. So,
you didn't see this, Shane?
I guess not. I've been like chest deep in spreadsheets for the last 4 hours. What did I miss?
Bad stuff. Josh Stills, the backup O lineman on the Eagles, was arrested for rape and kidnapping from a charge that dates back to 2019.
Oof. Yeah. That's terrible.
Brutal.
Yeah. Awful there. Maybe the Browns could use an offensive lineman for next year.
Yeah, it's someone tweeted at me asking my thoughts on it, and it's like, yeah, I don't know, it's bad. I don't know what else to say really. It's absolutely reprehensible. I hope they cut him immediately. I don't have much else to say.
Yeah, I had not seen that, but that's awful. I won't comment without knowing more, but terrible. So, okay, let's move on from that. Let's get into these title games. Like I mentioned, we're going to be we're going to review the NFC and AFC title games. We're going to hold off on our Super Bowl preview until next week. That'll be next week's show, but then we're going to throw around to some of the coaching news that's going around. So let's dive in. We'll start, as we always do, with the Eagles game in the NFC Championship game. They bested the 49ers 31-7 in what was just a bizarre game. Just a where you have, the Skycam wire, the punt, did it hit the Skycam wire? And I can't believe we're in the year 2022 and an official can walk on the field and say, we just don't know. Like, how about we just show the video from the Skycam? I'm thinking if it shakes, the wire probably got hit. Just a thought.
I didn't think about that. It's pretty funny that we're even in the moment, and it's been 3 days since then. I hadn't thought about that. You're absolutely right. I can't believe that didn't cross my mind.
How does the broadcast never show that? Like, even I could understand if the NFL's like, I mean, we can't use that as conclusive proof, but how does the broadcast not show it? And it's not the first Skycam related incident this year. We had the Mac Jones, did his pass hit the Skycam or not? We had that whole thing, and
it definitely did. By the way,
yeah, it definitely did, and the punt definitely did too. But you had the Week 9 Jets-Bills game where the Skycam literally fell onto the field and it caused like a 15-minute delay. So I don't know.
Yeah.
There's some weird Skycam things going on, but that's not the only weird thing. For the second week in a row, the NFL had to go to the backup chains because the chain broke. Like, the Eagles literally play in a football field named The Link, and we cannot get chain links that won't break. Like, Mark, you can go to Home Depot and buy 10 yards of chain for like $100. Let's get first. I mean, we don't have to do the chain thing again. I said it last week. How are we measuring with chains that are 10 yards long instead of using the chip that's in the ball? But it was just hilarious. Like, it was, the game just felt so weird with so many of these things going on. It was one of the weirder games I've ever watched.
By the way, that boo was for the link chain joke there. That deserved every bit of that boo. But it is pretty funny that in back-to-back weeks we've broken the chains. Like, it's not like this is happening in New England and then San Fran and then Philadelphia. It happened in the same stadium back-to-back weeks. It's just
like, are
bizarre,
these 60-year-old men just in such excitement to move these chains they pull them too hard? Like, I don't even know.
I mean, we talked about it last week, and you just said we're not going to talk about it, but it is so ridiculous that the chains even exist at this point in 2023. It is unbelievable that we can't just like look at where the ball is and measure 10 yards from that electronically. Like, they do it every play within seconds on television. I know that that's not an official, as they always say, the yellow line is not official, but it's kind of official at this point. Like, when's the last time that it hasn't been official when you're watching one of these replays? So, yeah, it's ridiculous.
The whole thing with the ball and the chip in the ball, and it's in the middle of the ball, not like, and it's the furthest point of the ball, whatever. Why don't we just use the middle of the ball? Like, I still think that's more accurate. I mean, we're talking, I think that's still more accurate than a 45-year-old official that's standing 20 yards away on the sideline trying to see through flying bodies. So I just go to the tracking chip. That's all I got to say.
Billion-dollar industry, and we're just eyeballing it. We're just eyeballing spots. Like, I can't believe it. There's certain things, like, the NFL does such a better job in terms of the on-field watching product at fixing the issues. It feels like there's an issue every year, they go and fix it. Whereas the NBA and the MLB, these are issues that we discuss for, 5 to 10 years. I'm just shocked that the NFL, with all the money that pours into the sport and all the technological advancements that they have had and all the technological advancements that other sports have had, that this is still something we're talking about. Like, this feels like something that should have been solved 20 years ago, like, let alone now. Like, it's crazy to me. Every time I watch a line judge walk in and kind of be diagonal, like, they're not walking exactly straight anyway. Like, it's unbelievable.
The NFL handles first downs like my wife cooks. Just eyeball everything. Like, I try to cook, and I'm like, no. The recipe says a fourth of a cup, and she's like, yeah, just throw some in there. It's fine. And that just doesn't work for me. But apparently it works for her cooking and it works for the NFL. So anyways, okay, let's get into this actual game though. So the Eagles open up this game And they open up with a methodical drive that's got to be confidence inducing. You're playing against a super good defense. You walk the ball down the field. You get into field goal range and you have a 4th and 3. And Nick Sirianni does what he has done all year. He's hyper aggressive. He goes for it. And you could not fault him for saying, hey, let's kick the field goal. We feel confident in our defense. This is going to be a tough game. Let's take some points. But he chose to go on 4th and 3. The initial play's not there. Jalen Hurts bails to the left, and he's able to flip his hips, throw the ball to Devonta Smith for what appeared to be an incredible catch on 4th and 3. Devonta Smith jumps up, gives the sign, they run up and go tempo, and he did that because it wasn't a catch. The ball came out, and Smith knew that. But they get the play off. They end up scoring a touchdown, and it's just all the little things with the Eagles, I feel like the aggressiveness on 4th down, being well coached enough to just know immediately, like Smith jumps up and taps his fists together, and that's the signal to go tempo, and the whole team catches and they do it and they get it off before the NFL can review, or Kyle Shanahan throws a flag. It's all of these little things that adds up, and it leads to a touchdown for the Eagles defense. And then the 49ers get the ball, and they go 2 first downs, and they're slowly moving the ball, but then Reddick beats backup tight end Tyler Kroft. He strip sacks Brock Purdy, and unfortunately Purdy's injured on that play, and the Eagles get the ball back. And you thought the game might snowball, but it really didn't. The Eagles offense did nothing for the next 3 possessions. They gained like 8 total yards, and Christian McCaffrey scores a touchdown to tie it up. But then the Eagles put on 14 before half, including a drive where they went for it on 4th and 1 from their own 34-yard line. That's not a call many guys are making. Yes, it's aided by a Josh Johnson fumble. It's aided by some penalties, but at that point the route was on as the Eagles go up 21-7. I thought San Francisco in this game, they were killed by injuries and penalties. I thought those were the 2 biggest takeaways for the 49ers here.
Yeah, and I guess this is where we can have the conversation, and I don't think we want to go too far into the nonsense on social media, and I don't want to be too much of a homer. I'm willing to be a homer, but not too much of a homer. They were up 21-7 before Josh Johnson got knocked out of the game and before it became a one-armed Brock Purdy. So I've heard a lot of, the Eagles beat a one-armed Brock Purdy and Daniel Jones to get to the NFC Championship, and it's like, well, that's not necessarily true. They were up 21-7 by the time Josh Johnson got hurt. They were up 7-0 with our defensive line bearing down his neck. And that's the other thing. Like, not that I'm celebrating the fact that the Eagles injured a player. That's not what I'm doing. But in some ways, people are acting like, oh, Brock Purdy must have tripped off the bus, and that's why the 49ers didn't have a quarterback. Or, oh, they lost both their quarterbacks. Like, how can you expect them? The Eagles knocked both of their quarterbacks out of the game because they couldn't be blocked. Your offensive line couldn't stop us, and unfortunately, that caused an injury when your quarterback got hit. And it got hit multiple times without, an injury, Josh Johnson, in terms of that. So it's just their offensive line was so overmatched, and that's saying a lot because it's one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. And the tackles, where I saw a lot on Twitter where we were kind of getting pressure on the edges, on McGlinchey, on Trent Williams, and then even some things where they made some really bizarre coaching decisions in terms of who was blocking who. But those are excellent offensive linemen. It's not like, we were going against backup offensive linemen. We were beating offensive linemen who are the best in the sport. So it drives me a little insane and up a wall to hear some of the narratives that have come out of this game due to the injuries. I think if you watched that game, you'd be pretty hard-pressed to come away with the fact that you think San Fran would have won if Purdy was healthy.
Yeah, so the 49ers, to your point about them being unblockable, the 49ers surrendered to pressure on 61.9% of QB dropbacks, and that's the 3rd highest rate of any game this entire season. So the Eagles' pass rush was on one. And you never want to see a player get injured. I mean, Eagles fans of all people know that. 2019, Carson Wentz goes out in the first quarter of the playoff game against the Seahawks on a dirty hit. And this was not a dirty hit. This was a football play on a dirty hit. And we watched Josh McCown come in and try to win that game. And, we felt bad then, and I felt bad for the 49ers players. I felt bad for the fans that happened. Unfortunately, it is part of the game. You would rather it be a game played at full health, but that wasn't the case. And the Eagles just won this game in the trenches. One of the matchups that I highlighted last week was Jordan Mailata and how he was going to do, especially if they rushed Bosa against him, which they largely didn't do, and I think that was a mistake. But Jordan Mailata has only allowed one pressure in 57 pass sets this postseason. He's the highest graded offensive tackle by PFF this offseason, and that's after a year when he largely struggled. Like, the Eagles are excelling in the trenches. And this was Jalen Hurts' worst game of the season, in my opinion, by far. He had 4.7 yards per dropback. He had a 37% success rate passing. He did not look comfortable in the pocket. He missed throws. 16% of his passes were inaccurate, which is the third worst of the year for him. And the offense just dominated in the trenches. And it's not sexy. It was under 4 yards per carry. They still rushed for almost 150 yards on a team allowing 70 yards a game. And they won a dirty game in the trenches. And what's important, and what we've pointed out all year, is that the Eagles can win on the ground and through the air, and not a lot of teams can do that. You look at the Chiefs and Isaiah Pacheco, what he rushed for in the Bengals game that we'll get to, and it was nothing. Mahomes had to win that game on one leg. If Jalen Hurts was on one leg and he can't move around or throw very well in a game, they could hand the ball off and they could have a chance to win. And so they won by 24 in a game where their quarterback just honestly didn't play that well. And that's part of what makes this team so good.
Yeah, the Hurts thing, I'm not too concerned about it in terms of him not playing well. He definitely missed the one throw to Brown, absolutely. And you could probably make the argument he missed the one throw that ended up being a holding call that was also on Brown. But the one missed, Smith had hit him in the chest on the one deep ball. It was a little underthrown, but was kind of thrown as a 50-50 ball. It's not like Smith burned the guy anyway. So if that's a catch, he's got 170 yards instead of whatever it was, then I think we feel a little bit differently about it, and it's graded a little bit differently. So, but you could also say the same thing for the fact that you could take away the Smith catch that wasn't a catch, that was ruled one. So you can make that argument the other way too. He obviously just didn't have to play that well. Even early on, I felt like they were too run heavy. And that's, it ended up working out, and it probably was the smart decision in terms of being safe and everything like that. But like you said, they really didn't play all that well right after the injury. It took a little bit, 3 straight drives punting the ball there, where I felt like they were committing to the run way too much when obviously the weakness was supposed to be throwing on the outsides. And I just think that they were in a spot where they were like, all right, I think we can kind of manage this game pretty conservatively for the rest of the game. And I think that's what they did. So I just don't think they needed to throw the ball that much or that well.
Yeah. Clearly, yeah. And so all this culminates in the Eagles making a trip to the Super Bowl. Like, after Chip Kelly got fired, Mark, if I would have told you that in the next 8 years the Eagles will go to the Super Bowl 2 times with 2 different coaches, like, that's just insane. Eagles second-year coaches just go to the Super Bowl. And so I've got a take here for you. We just saw, and we'll get into it in a minute, we just saw Sean Payton get traded for a first and second round pick. We know what happens after an Eagles coach goes to the Super Bowl in their second year. Do the Eagles just put Sirianni out there, trade him for a first round pick, and let's hire a new guy and know in 2 years we'll be back in the Super Bowl? Is that the plan here? You're muted.
It might have to be. I'm sorry, Nick. We'll put the statue out there, you and Jalen talking to each other, and then we'll have to have, organizational unrest and have a controvery. We'll have to trade Jalen. We'll have to fire him. Yeah, it'll be a whole thing.
Ian Book and Shane Steichen in 2024. Now, obviously in jest there, but Eagles fans don't get mad at me. But I do want to. Nick Sirianni ends the year 5-0 against Coach of the Year finalists, and he's not a finalist. And to me, that's absurd.
I did see a tweet where it was basically saying, if Nick Sirianni wins this Super Bowl against Andy Reid, who obviously I think that there is probably a little bit more want to there for Jeffrey Lurie. I'm sure he definitely wants this one even more now that it's against Andy. But I think that you could probably say that he's in the Mike Tomlin range of kind of safe forever. Like you could kind of pretty much name your price and you're here until you resign, where Sirianni probably has and I say that now, like you said, Doug Peterson got 18 months before people were talking about it. So maybe I'm mistaken, but it does feel like this would kind of be, he'd be the guy for the next 15 to 20 years if he wins this.
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you have anything else you want to say on this game? Because I do have a little rant I want to do, but I'll see if you got anything else on the game first.
It's kind of tough just because everything's so tied into the next game, and we're going to be doing a big Super Bowl preview next week. I'll let you go on the rant. Maybe I'll, if I get fired up about some dumb narrative relating to this game, maybe I'll fire up after you talk. But for now, I can save it for next week.
Okay, so here we go. I'm gonna go on my little rant here for a second. I want to talk about some of these awards. Obviously, I mentioned Coach of the Year, and that's absurd. Let's talk about Defensive Player of the Year, where Nick Bosa, did he play in this game? Was he there? Because he made no impact, and he's going to win Defensive Player of the Year. Meanwhile, Hassan Reddick has dominated, absolutely wrecked games. He's been incredible over the last, 2 months? I went on a little rant during Birds of the Round Table last night, for those of you that listen to that too. But I mean, we are talking Hassan of House Reddick, the rightful heir to Defensive Player of the Year, the destroyer of worlds, the pass rusher of the great NFC East, the king of strip sacks, and the breaker of quarterbacks. And he is not even a finalist for Defensive Player of the Year. That's just ridiculous. And then let's talk Comeback Player of the Year, where we've got Geno Smith, who's coming back from just being a bad football player. Christian McCaffrey, who's coming off of a strained hamstring. Saquon Barkley, coming off of a sprained ankle. And Jared Goff, who is coming off of a season where he missed 2 games with a knee injury. Those are your 4 finalists. Brandon Graham, 34 years old, coming off of an Achilles injury that cost him an entire season. He's not even mentioned for his 11-sack year, best year of his career, and he's not even mentioned. It's just absurd that Eagles players and coaches are being left out of all of these awards. I'm sick of the soft schedule thing. Everybody wants to discount. They played a soft schedule. The Eagles are 9-1 against teams with winning records this season, which is tied for the best in history. By win percentage, 9 teams had an easier schedule, including the Chiefs and the 49ers. By ESPN's Football Power Index, 9 teams had an easier schedule, including the 49ers. By DVOA, Philadelphia, San Francisco, and Kansas City were all bottom 4 in terms of schedule. It's almost as if winning all of your games make your opponent's records worse. I don't know, it's a simple math thing, but I'm tired of that. I'm tired of they had an easy postseason run. Dallas fans, the Eagles just whooped the team that you lost to last week. So you want to call it easy? Why did you lose to a team that was easy to beat? Did they have to go through Burrow to get to the title game? No. Maybe that's why you go win the 1 seed. So you get the easiest team left every step of the way. So I'm tired of the revisionist history with everything. The Eagles are a darn good football team. They're the first team since the 1989 49ers to win back-to-back playoff games by 24-plus points. And so don't tell me it was an easy schedule. Don't tell me the team's not good. They're an elite football team, and they're absolutely the team that should be in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. They're 16-1 with their starting quarterback this season, and we're talking about them as if we have no idea what they are because they haven't played anybody, and it's so patently absurd. Everyone knows that everyone that follows me, I should say, knows that I interact with Barstool Sports a lot, the Pick Central show. I've been on the show. I'm a big fan, and they have Philly fans on there who are defending us, but there's a couple. There's a Cowboys fan on there, and there's a Giants fan on there. who just repeatedly repeat the same talking points about how the Eagles haven't played anybody. Jalen Hurts is unproven. Look at what Hurts has done in these last 2 games, and look at what the Eagles have done in the last 2 months. And it's like, well, they're in the Super Bowl. This isn't the college football playoff committee. Like, they weren't voted into the Super Bowl. They earned their way there by getting the 1 seed and beating the teams that were presented in front of them. The New York Giants, how many people picked the Giants not only to cover against us, but to beat us? How many people talked about how plucky the Giants were, and it feels like 07 again, and this is the new Eli Manning team. And how about the 49ers? They've won 12 straight. Everyone told us, oh, well, this is a real team. You finally get to play a real defense. They put up 31 points. And I know that there's some game flow things to consider there with the fact that the offense couldn't move the ball. But ultimately, it's such sour grapes. And for Cowboys fans to be talking at this point is so pathetic and so embarrassing, when the reason that you're talking is the fact that you put up 12 points on San Fran, so you didn't get your chance to face us. You put up 12 points. What's the point of paying like $100 million to your core key position players with Dak and Zeke, and now they're going to franchise tag Pollard, and they're going to have to pay CD, they're going to have to pay Schultz. Good luck, guys. You put up 12 points with that exact crew. I don't think firing Kellen Moore is going to fix everything there. I don't know how this turned into me yelling about the Cowboys, but it seems like that is who is the most prevalent on social media in terms of complaining about this Eagles run. But the Super Bowl conversation on so many outlets is just embarrassing when we're talking about a team that's been the best team and the best record in the NFL for the entire season, wire to wire, wall to wall. The Eagles have had the best record in the entire NFL. I don't understand the narratives. It seems like we're just going to invent them every week. And, what happens if Patrick Mahomes – I mean, I hate to say this. More than anybody how much I respect Mahomes and how much I like Mahomes. If Patrick Mahomes hurts his ankle in the Super Bowl, which, with our pass rush and with his injury – it's incredibly possible for something to happen where Patrick Mahomes goes out of the game with the injury that he's already coming into the game with, and we beat Chad Henne. People are going to be whining and crying and complaining while Jalen Hurts hoists the Lombardi Trophy. Like that's where we're at. And if our pass rush is so dominant, maybe you should block us and we won't injure your quarterback. And it's not like we're TCU. TCU this year, I know you're not a college football guy, but TCU this year basically made the college football championship in part because they knocked the starting quarterback out in half of the games they played. We didn't do that. We did it in the NFC championship, but it's just patently ridiculous. And everyone that's talking about how overrated the Eagles are or how they didn't earn their way here, Las Vegas has a pretty good read on things. And Las Vegas, the bookmakers are pretty good at their jobs and pretty good at saying who they think is going to win a game. We are currently favored against, in my opinion, the most talented player to ever play the sport of football, and most certainly the most talented player to ever play the position of quarterback in Patrick Mahomes. The Eagles are favored in the Super Bowl. I think that says everything that needs to be said.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get into that Chiefs game then. The Chiefs beat Cincinnati at 23-20. I think this is the fourth straight time these teams have played, and it's been decided by 3 points. I could be wrong on that, but Patrick Mahomes in this game, he did it all. 29 of 43 passing for 326 yards, 2 touchdowns. That third down touchdown he threw to Marquez Valdez-Scantling in the third quarter to take the lead. That was just a rocket, and they took the lead. I won't say they never looked back. It was a close game all the way through. I feel like any discussion of this game, unfortunately, has to start a little bit with officiating, and it was a great game, and so I don't want to get totally off the rails into that. It sucks that that's what we have to talk about, but let's talk about the penalty on Joseph Osai. Patrick Mahomes scrambles on third down. They're trying to get into field goal range. He goes out of bounds at about the 40-yard line. And you have Joseph Osai, a rookie, technically not a rookie, but he was injured all of last year. It's his first year. So we'll say a rookie, Joseph Osai, is sprinting to try to get Mahomes out of bounds, playing with your season on the line. Don't give up yardage for the field goal. He pushes Mahomes as Mahomes is already out of bounds, and then their feet get tangled up. They go down. I think it makes it look worse than it was, that his foot
100%.
hits Mahomes' foot and Mahomes goes down. But this was not a flop. This was not flopping like Taylor Heineke did against the Eagles earlier this year with the take a knee thing. Mahomes got pushed. He got tripped. Osai definitely pushed him out of bounds. In my opinion, I'll see what you think. It sucks that this happened in such a high leverage spot, but it's the right call. Like, Mahomes' foot was already out of bounds. I don't even know if Osai knew that. It doesn't matter. This is how the game's been called all year, and so it sucks that it happens on the last play of the game and it gives them a chip shot field goal instead of a 57-yarder. But it is what it is. It's the way it's been called all year. It shouldn't change in that spot. What did you think? Did you think that was the right call? What were your thoughts on it?
I think it could go either way. I think it's 50-50. And like you said, I think if he doesn't hit his foot, I would probably be arguing that it isn't, because I don't think it would have looked like one. But that's semantics.
Yeah.
I don't think you can complain too much about that. Like, if they didn't call it, I wouldn't have complained. Now that they did, I can't be too upset. What I've seen and I had, as you know, I had a very big future bet on the Bengals to win the AFC. So this was very upsetting. I also had a nice long shot bet on the game to go to overtime. The Bengals had the ball with 40 seconds left. I figured I was looking pretty good to at least hit one of the two. Somehow the Chiefs found a way to win in regulation, which definitely cost me a little bit. But in terms of that play, that play didn't upset me too much. I think what Bengals fans and bettors have a problem with, it's a shame that the officiating has now been boiled down to that play, because that's all that's going to be talked about. The officiating was really bad in this game. That play wouldn't have made the top 5 of plays that I thought were mishandled by officiating. And I think there was one or two that went against Kansas City as well that were pretty bad. The officiating in this game was honestly just dreadful on both sides. It did seem like it kind of ended up probably costing Cincinnati more than it cost Kansas City. I will say that some of them didn't turn into anything. Like, the most egregious one was the fact that they blew the play dead, allegedly, but they let the play go, and then they didn't get a first down. They ran the play right back, and the Chiefs didn't get a first down anyway. They didn't get points out of it anyway. So it wasn't too big of an issue there, or it didn't end up being too big of an issue on that one instance. So, but yeah, it was definitely a poorly officiated game.
Yeah.
All in all, I'm sure that, I'm sure Cincinnati fans are upset.
Yeah. And like I said, that's a tough way to lose the game. And there's officiating things that went in before, but at the end of the day, you cannot let a game come down to one call by an official. And, that's easy to say for me watching the Bengals lose, but I've said the same thing consistently for years. I said it after no clear recovery, Eagles, Dallas. Like, you cannot let a game come down to that. And unfortunately, when two teams are so good and so evenly matched, a lot of times the margins can be that thin. But the Bengals, they weren't able to protect Burrow in this game. He was sacked 5 times. He was pressured on 43% of his dropbacks. And to be honest, I don't think it's that the O-line played worse than they did against the Bills. The O-line didn't have the snow to aid them in slowing down pass rushers. And so all the Bills fans in my mentions about my take that you should play playoff games and not in snowy weather, that snow on the ground is probably why you didn't sack Burrow 5 or 6 times and maybe beat the Bengals as well. But I'll stick a pin in that one and leave that one. But the Bengals...
what did they score, 10 points in that game?
Yeah, something like that.
The Bills, their offense stunk in that game anyway.
Yeah, but I do think it had less to do with the O-line playing worse. I think it had a lot more to do with not playing in snow, and so pass rushers were able to get out of their stances and go. The Bengals started slow in this game. They climbed out of a 13-3 deficit early, just like they did last year, right? But it just wasn't enough. And instant classic game for the Chiefs, and not getting into Super Bowl preview too much, but They were so hamstrung by receiver injuries. Justin Watson was ruled out before kickoff. And then they lose Mecole Hardman, Kadarius Toney, and Juju all in this game. So we'll track their progress towards the Super Bowl. But Mahomes was out here with Kelsey and Marquez Valdez-Scantling and one ankle, and that was about it. And so I thought just an incredible performance by Mahomes just sort of adds to his lore.
Yeah, I mean, he's the best player on the planet. He's the baddest. He's the baddest man on the planet. He's just an absolute beast. And way too many people doubted Mahomes in terms of the whole Cincinnati thing. And I'll admit that I got caught up in it as well. I wouldn't have if I thought Mahomes was healthy. So the reason that I was so heavy on Cincinnati and so confident in them was because I did think that there was a chance Mahomes got knocked out of the game, even if he played. And obviously that didn't happen. And I would say that he was actually, like, I don't know what you think. I think I would say he was probably healthier than I would have guessed he was going to be, right?
Yeah, I thought he looked really good in the early parts of the game. There was the one throw where he was rolling left and he sort of had to flip his hips and put a little extra on a pass. And it seemed like he kind of came up a little gimpy after that and then was for the rest of the game. But yeah, I thought he looked pretty good overall. I think he'll be nearly 100% in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I agree there. And that kind of flies in the face. Going into the conference championship, I was saying, maybe I'd rather face Kansas City because if Mahomes isn't going to be healthy, you just, you pretty much have to cover Kelsey and the receivers don't scare you at that point. But after watching Mahomes on Saturday or on Sunday and watching the Bengals O-line, probably would have rather seen Cincinnati.
Yeah. So Patrick Mahomes is the odds-on favorite to win the MVP. I think he's at like minus 750 right now. Assuming he wins the MVP, it would be the first time that an MVP has made the Super Bowl since 2017 when the MVP and Tom Brady lost to the Eagles, which I thought was interesting. The league MVP has only made the Super Bowl 9 times since the year 2000, and they've lost all 9 times. It was Brady in 2017, Matt Ryan in 2016, Cam Newton in 2015, Peyton Manning in 2013 and 2009, Brady in 2007, Sean Alexander, which is how you know it was a different era, in 2005, Rich Gannon 2002, Kurt Warner in 2001. The last time an MVP made it to the Super Bowl and won was Kurt Warner in 1999. So assuming he wins, he'll be trying to become the first MVP to win the Super Bowl since 1999. The Eagles will try to become the second straight team to knock out the MVP in the Super Bowl after they did it in 2017.
Hey, you know what, Mahomes, you can have the MVP. Jalen will take the Super Bowl MVP. How about that?
Yeah, I'm down for that. I think Jalen will be as well.
Which, by the way, I think I mentioned this on the show. Yeah, I did. I definitely mentioned this on the show last week. Jalen Hurts was plus 350 to win Super Bowl MVP last week. Hopped on it. I believe that number's down to like plus 115, plus 120. And by the way, I will just say, I firmly believe this. I think I'm actually curious to hear what Shane thinks. If you want to bet on the Eagles to win the Super Bowl, how I would go about that is I would just instead of betting minus 1.5 or instead of betting minus 125 or whatever the odds are on the money line, I would just bet Jalen to win Super Bowl MVP. Because I think in about 80 and 90% of scenarios that we win this game, Jalen's going to win MVP.
Yeah, I mean, I know Cooper Kupp won it last year, but I feel like it's almost always your quarterback, right? I'm looking back at the list
60,
here.
70%.
Okay, Kupp, Brady, Mahomes, Edelman, Foles, Brady, Von Miller, Brady, Malcolm Smith, Joe Flacco, Eli Manning, Aaron Rodgers. So yeah, it's generally going to be your quarterback. If you like, tell me what you think about this. If the Chiefs, if you want to bet on the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl, how about taking Travis Kelce at plus 800 over Patrick Mahomes at plus 135 to win Super Bowl MVP? Like, he has nobody to throw to except for Travis Kelce. What are the odds that if the Chiefs win, Travis Kelce gets the Super Bowl MVP?
I just think it would have to be so crazy. Like he would have to have such an insane game for that to happen. And I actually kind of feel the same way about the Mahomes MVP bet as I do about the Hurts MVP bet, where I think that there's probably a value instead of betting Chiefs money line to just bet that Mahomes at plus 135. I think Kelsey would have to have like 200 yards and like 2 touchdowns to get the MVP, or he would have to account for like 75% of Mahomes' yards. I just think it's more like than not that Mahomes ends up winning that MVP, even if the odds aren't that sexy or aren't that juicy. I think that that's probably the smart play.
Yeah, I wonder too if he wins if he wins the whole MVP, if they might be a little more apt to give Super Bowl MVP to Kelsey if it's close.
Well, we already know Mahomes won the MVP basically at this point.
Yeah, I'm sure he did. So, okay, now we're gonna throw around. We're like I said at the top, we're gonna save our Super Bowl preview for next week. Give us a little more time to dig into matchups, find out where guys are at injury wise and all that. But we do want to throw it around the league and talk about some of the coaching news. Dominoes are starting to fall. I'm gonna lead off here, Mark, with Nathaniel Hackett being hired by the Jets to be their offensive coordinator. In 6 years as an offensive play caller, do you know how many times Nathaniel Hackett has had a DVOA offense ranked above 25th?
How many?
1. 5 of 6 times he's been a play caller. He's been a bottom 7 offense in the league. In 2017, he was the Jags offensive play caller, and they were 15th. That's the only year that he's been above 25th, and he was literally league average.
I used to
terrible move by the Jets, unless it gets him Aaron Rodgers.
I used to defend Nathaniel Hackett because he made Blake Bortles like average, and I was like, man, if he can do that, then he must be good. He's a total buffoon. So yeah, I actually feel like LaFleur's a good coach too. So I think the Jets made a big mistake on the OC there.
Yeah, same. Okay, let's go to Denver. I know you've got some stuff to say about this one. I had a whole thing planned out about how the Denver coaching search was going terribly. They wanted John Harbaugh, and he said no. And then Sean Payton pushed back the interview to go interview at Arizona instead, which is never a good sign. And then they wanted DeMeco Ryans, but DeMeco Ryans didn't want to go there. And so he wants to go to Houston, and where 2 consecutive coaches have been one and done. But DeMeco Ryans wanted to go there instead. And they wanted Robert Quinn, and he's going to – not Robert Quinn. That's a football player. Dan Quinn. And Dan Quinn was like, nah, fam, I'm just going to stay in Dallas. And it was not going well. But then the news broke that the Saints and Broncos are finalizing compensation. So they're going to end up trading for Sean Payton. I think it was – correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't write it down. They're giving up a first-round pick this year, which was the 30th overall pick they got from the 49ers. And they're giving up a second next year, and they get a third back next year, and they get Sean Payton. That was the deal, correct?
Yeah. And I'm just going to real quick jump in. This is going to have to be my parting shot on my way out here. But this is what I wanted to talk about with the Denver situation. I've been so negative on Denver, and I'm still not as high on the roster as some other people, where even after this news, I've heard some people be like, oh, well, you look at all the stuff on the roster. That's the same thing people were saying last year. And I know that Nathaniel Hackett was a big part of why that team stunk, but I think that the roster was nowhere near as good as people were considering it, even though the defense was better than I gave it credit for. I will say when your offense – it's like in the NBA, when your offense scores a lot of points, it's usually going to hurt your defensive rating because the other team keeps up and the other team, the pace quickens. It's the same thing in the NFL where if you're scoring 10 points per game, it's probably going to drive your opponent's totals down. Like you're probably going to give up less points per game when you're scoring an embarrassingly low amount of them just because you're not pushing teams as much. I think that that's just human nature. But the defense is obviously very good. How I feel about this Denver thing, and I've heard a lot of like, oh, Denver's so stupid. How do you trade a first and a second for Sean Payton? The way I look at it, the second and the third swap, that's probably a difference of 15 to 20 picks, whatever. I think at that point that's, inconsequential. The first pick, the first rounder is the 29th pick, and it is from San Francisco. and San Francisco traded for Chubb. Or Miami traded for Chubb using San Fran's pick, and then uh, that's a low pick. That's kind of a found pick, and I think that I think that this is the only move that Denver had was getting Sean Payton because they don't have cap space. They don't have high picks. They don't have anything they can do with the Russell Wilson situation. They're locked in. This is all they had to do, and he's the second best coach of my lifetime, in my opinion. So yeah, was it a nice part? Like they probably paid too much of a price. Sure, I think this is the only option they had though, and I have to leave you on that.
The other option would have been to eat the salary, with Wilson, fully commit to the tank, and just realize that it's going to be a bad year. Get somebody in there as a placeholder, tank, get rid of Wilson, and then you can go for Caleb Williams. But that is unpalatable to new ownership. I get that. I'm not a fan of trading a first round pick for a coach. I don't know that a coach is worth that, but I know Mark would disagree with me on that. The one thing I will say is I can't wait to see who Howie Roseman drafts for the Eagles with that first round pick the Saints just got. It's going to be fascinating. So I'll rapid fire here a couple more coaching moves, and then I'll get you guys out of here. DeMeco Ryans went to Houston. That became official yesterday. I think that's a great hire by Houston. Obviously, he's going to have to pull in some offensive coaching staff, right? But he's going to do wonders for that defense. I do wonder if football is going to start swinging back in the direction of defenses that can stop the elite quarterbacks. It used to be defenses win championships, and that's not the way that it's been anymore. But a lot of times in the NFL, the way to win is to zig when everyone else zags. You've seen it with the Eagles in their running game, that it's become all about explosive passing offenses and stopping those. And meanwhile, the Eagles built the best rushing attack, and now they're running on defenses that are built to stop explosive passing plays. And so maybe this works out for the Texans. He's got connections there from being a player, but they've got to commit to him long term. You can't keep doing this one and done thing. Hopefully he brings in a strong offensive guy to develop whatever quarterback they end up with. Next, we have Frank Reich to Carolina. I liked this move. Carolina's got to make a move for a quarterback. They've got pieces on defense. You can attract a good defensive coach, an up-and-comer, to go work with that defense. Frank Reich coming in as the head coach, I think, gives you the ability to draw a decent offensive play caller. And it's also going to, he does good work with quarterbacks. Whatever you might say about how Carson Wentz went in Indianapolis, obviously Carson Wentz was in full implosion mode, but in Philadelphia, he worked really well with Wentz. He helped develop him. He tailored his offense to different quarterbacks in Indianapolis. So I liked that move for a team that really needs a QB developer. Then let's talk about Bill O'Brien goes to New England as the offensive coordinator. And I mean, come on. He couldn't even get an above average offense in Houston when he had Deshaun Watson, peak Deshaun Watson. I don't understand why Bill Belichick is just recycling his old disciples, the Joe Judge, Matt Patricia, Bill O'Brien. The best thing for New England, and I know you can't do it, but the best thing for New England is just to get Bill Belichick out the door. This team will never be good again with Bill Belichick there, with Bill Belichick just recycling these old assistants. It's time for New England to move on, and I really don't feel like they can do that until Bill just decides to retire. So I don't know if that's on the radar, but they really need a GM to come in. Belichick has been a poor GM. He's been poor at hiring guys. I mean, he obviously has people that are good under him, Josh McDaniels and all these other people. They don't do good when they go somewhere else, but he continues to bring back these people that just aren't that good. And so, I hate it for Mac Jones that he's going to be saddled with Bill O'Brien at this point. New England needs a fresh start, and I don't know when that's going to come. And then the last one here, Kellen Moore mutually parting ways with the Cowboys, which is pretty much what you tell people when your girlfriend breaks up with you, right? It was mutual. Cowboys decided to scapegoat Kellen Moore, and there's some validity to the Kellen Moore criticism. There were times there was film out where they're running 4 curls at 8 yards on one play, and that's not the best design. But my bigger criticism of Moore is his inability to rein in Dak Prescott when Dak is having a bad game. Dak's an up and down player, and he's a good player, but he has bad games, and Moore has to be able to rein that in, and he doesn't. It's like when Dak has a bad game, he just implodes, and Moore doesn't do anything to help it. And that's concerning, right? That's really concerning. I don't think he's the issue. If this came along with Mike McCarthy being shown the door, it makes sense. We want a whole new approach, whole new offense, fresh start. But to get rid of Moore and then hand over play calling to Mike McCarthy, that's just a travesty. The Cowboys are going nowhere with Mike McCarthy calling the shots on offense. So that's a terrible move for Dallas. Now for the Chargers, I love this move. First of all, upgrading from Joe Lombardi to literally anyone would be good. But to bring in Kellen Moore, he's worked with a similar player to Justin Herbert in Dak Prescott. They're both good processors. Now, Herbert's not as prone to the mistakes as Dak is. And so we'll see if he can come in and he can work with Herbert and he can get some verticality to that passing game. He's got another quarterback that's a really good processor. I think it'll be a good fit. But we'll see. Maybe there's things that Mike McCarthy are being blamed for that were really Kellen Moore's fault. But I do expect overall that move to be a net negative for the Cowboys and a net positive for the Chargers. And that's going to wrap it up here for our AFC NFC Championship review, the coaching carousel talk that we wanted to get into. Thank you guys for joining us for episode number 90 of Chalk Talk. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know that you do, smash that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episode. Those of you watching on YouTube, on Facebook here live, dropping comments, we really appreciate you joining in. If you're listening later on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, any of these other platforms, please give us 5-star ratings and reviews. It'll really help us get the podcast out there. Maybe go follow it on a second platform just to help us out a little bit. We'd really appreciate it. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at @halfandhalf_TPL. He is at Mark Henry Jr. We're going to have a lot of content coming your way next week to get you ready for the Super Bowl. Just to tease it out, I'm looking at bringing on some Eagles guests and some Chiefs guests in separate podcasts to do some interview style things. Get you guys all the information that you need for the Super Bowl. But for now, from me, from Mark, and from the Painted Lines, we'll see you guys next time.